Hello everyone, this is the audio for MHCET 2018. Let's go on to the first part, which is the overview of the paper. The Maharashtra CET has been very consistent across the past couple of years in the sense that it has got 200 questions. Every question has 1 mark for every correct answer, meaning it's a total of 200 marks, and it has no negative markings. It has 5 options and is a computer based linear test, meaning you can flit around among the sections that are given to us. The paper itself is divided into 4 sections. The first one is logical reasoning, which has 75 questions, abstract reasoning, which is visual reasoning, which has 25 questions, quantitative aptitude, which also includes data interpretation, which has a total of 50 questions, and verbal ability, which includes RCs as well, which has 50 questions, making it a total of 200 questions. This time around, the MHCET was spread across 2 slots of 2 days, meaning it was spread across 4 slots. But what we noticed is that there is a level of standardization that might be applied this year, which we are not going to comment on. But IBPS, the conducting authority, has said that some level of normalization will be applied to all these slots to get a common score and a percentile. Across all the days, there was some level of variation in the difficulty, a few questions here and there, but on the whole, the paper was pretty standardized across all 4 slots and quite a few questions being repeated. This is the overall analysis of the paper. Let's get into every section one by one. We'll start with the biggest section of all, which is the reasoning section, which includes both verbal and analytical reasoning, which had 75 questions. A wide variety of questions were asked from direction sense, data sufficiency, syllogisms, cause and effect, statement conclusion, coding, decoding, etc. The biggest challenges were the caselets of logical puzzles, which were about 35 questions in all, and every caselet had on an average 4 to 6 questions. The problem with these caselets was that these were very time consuming and one could solve only about 2 or at the very maximum 3 of the caselets. So the key here was to pick the right caselets to solve in the shortest amount of time. There was also an input-output or data structures caselet of medium difficulty level with 5 questions in it. There were 5 questions based on data comparison and mathematical operations this year. Critical reasoning questions were based on strengthening weakening arguments, inferences, and resolve the paradox. There was a caselet on coding decoding, which had phrases and their appropriate codes attached to them. However, in this set of codes, we could only decipher 1 or 2 words through the standard elimination method, but the rest we had to use through some sort of logic, like shifting the first letter and then deriving the code, something of that sort. And on the whole, this was the biggest and the most time consuming section and could easily be the game changer in the percentile calculation. The ideal time that has been allotted to this section is 60 minutes, which is 1 hour. We would rate the level of difficulty as moderate to difficult, and the ideal attempts would be around 45 with an ideal score of just over 40. The next section is the abstract reasoning or the visual reasoning section. This has to be easily the easiest section and the quickest section in the entire paper because we had just 25 questions, number one, and the questions were not too complicated. Just by figuring out probably 2 of the 5 or 6 symbols, we could find the answer from the options. This could have been the biggest scoring section in your paper had you spotted all of this beforehand. So there were 25 questions in this section with 15 questions coming from series, meaning find the next figure, and the rest from analogies. Now, the 10 questions that were there from analogies had 5 questions wherein we had to find just the last figure from the option pair, and the other 5 questions were to find the entire pair. So those 5 questions could have taken a little longer than usual, but on the whole, we would rate this section as very easy with an ideal time of 20 minutes to be given for this section. You should have attempted all 25 questions and you should have gotten anywhere from 20 to 22 correct in this section. Moving on to the quantitative aptitude and data interpretation section. Unlike last year, this section had relatively difficult questions But there was a good mix from all topics, including profit and loss, simple interest, compound interest, average and partnership, time and work, time and distance, and probability. We also happen to see 5 sets of data interpretation of 5 questions each. That is a total of 25 questions, which is effectively half the section. Data interpretation caselets included everything from tables, line graphs, bar graphs, and pie charts, and were all easy, but unfortunately, they were very calculation heavy. So, again, the question was, what are the caselets that you can pick and solve with the fewest variables to actually calculate, such that you can extract the maximum out of these 5 caselets? There were also 5 questions in this section based on data comparison, which had effectively quadratic equations, and we had to find out which of the values was bigger or less than or greater than or equal to. And that was something that was, again, if you are good at algebraic calculations, you could have gotten these 5 questions. These were all easy questions. An aspirant with a good calculation speed can easily crack a decent number of questions, which is why we have allocated 40 minutes to this section with an ideal attempt of over 35 and an ideal score of just over 30. The last section is the verbal ability and RC section. And as expected, just like last time, there was a spread of questions from all types with a few unexpected inclusions and omissions. As compared to last year, the logical discontinuity question and the logical continuation questions did not make an appearance, but the standardized parts were that there was a similar weightage given to RC this time around. So just like last year, we had a weightage of 15 questions from 50 from RC, and there was one passage with 7 questions and one with 8 questions. There were the usual types of questions like find the synonym and antonym, which had 2 questions, conjunction replacement, which is again 2 questions, and idiom and word usage, which had 2 and 3 questions respectively. There were also fill in the blanks of 2 questions, and by far the biggest change in this section was that grammar was given substantial importance, with 9 questions coming from spotting the error and 3 questions coming from the underlined phrase replacement type. Also, there were 5 questions from find the correct sentences. So that is a total of 9 and 3, 12, and about 5, which is 15 to 17 questions. So this had put an immense amount of pressure on kids who had good grammar skills, but if they had practiced their grammar, they could have gotten these questions very easily. There was also a standard 5-question caselet driven parajumble, but what is usually asked in CET, which is, let's say, the parajumble caselet has question 1, find the third sentence, question 2, find the fourth sentence, etc., were not asked this year. Instead, there were questions like the given sentence should follow which of the given statements, which is A, B, C, D, or E. After the rearrangement, how many statements change their places, and things like that. So this was again a slightly tricky variant of the parajumble, but nothing that was unsolvable. However, seeing the unexpected nature of the question, it would have taken a couple of extra seconds to solve. There was a new way of asking a match the following question, which had in one column fragments of the beginning of the sentence, and in the second column fragments of the end of certain sentences, and we had to match the pairs and say that this fragment will of the beginning will match this fragment at the end. So that was also something that could have been easily gotten, but the problem was that there was some ambiguity in the questions. So this is something that we should have noticed, not writing it a though as a through, and not assuming it as a spelling error. Instead, if it says though and it is supposed to be through, you're not supposed to mark that answer at all. So for this section, we have given about 25 minutes with ideal attempts of 40 and ideal score of 35 or above. We are still left with 5 minutes. So the balance 5 minutes we have decided to allocate to mark all the unattempted questions. This takes care of the sectional analysis, and on the whole, we are expecting that a score of 115 or 120 should get an aspirant to about 99 percentile. So the cutoff for JBIMS this year could go as low as 125. On the whole, the exam had a few glaring errors in the LR section, meaning that there was a question which had the question to arrange 8 people with some attributes like the car they were driving, etc. But the names of only 7 of them were given, and then the variable of the eighth was given, which was a little disconcerting, but nothing that the students couldn't handle. The software interface was easy to use and navigate, and the interface had one very useful feature, that of minimizing the question palette. So when you could minimize the question palette, you could have an ease in navigating the RC section and the bigger and the wider caselet. So that was an interesting feature. And on the whole, like we said, 115 to 120 for 99 percentile, and JBIMS about 125. That's it. Thank you.